And we are ready to rock and roll. How is everyone? Welcome to your weekly Lovecraft Country review and just opinion podcast. And we're going to just try to break down as much as we can about everything that went on in this week's episode. I will tell you something. I got my friend to watch the show with me, so I was able to rewatch from the start up to episode 4. So I'll definitely give you some thoughts on things that I picked up that I had missed first time around, especially since when I rewatched it, I had captions on, and man, do they make a difference. Everybody whispers nowadays on these TV shows, right? So even the last episode, episode 4, the scene in the library, I was like, what's he saying? And then with the captions on, it definitely made way more sense. I want to thank everyone that's been watching these. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you're digging these videos. And Monday nights, I'm on with my friend Peter and we're talking movies. We're talking everything that we've watched. And tonight, actually, because I'm recording this on a Monday, we'll talk about Tenet, Pocahontas, and a few obscure movies. Pocahontas, oh my God. Mulan, wrong Disney movie. We'll talk some Mulan and see how that goes. But anyway, let's get to Lovecraft Country and this episode, A History of Violence. And we'll also, again, talk a little bit of controversy, especially surrounding the introduction of a trans character named Yahima and how some have felt about that. Okay, there's an article in the Vulture website, magazine, however you want to call it, that brought up an interesting point. I had a friend of mine who actually brought up a similar point, so we'll talk about that when we get there. But where to begin? Well, let's begin by saying rewatching this show is not a bad idea. You pick up a lot of stuff that you missed. And I'll tell you about one thing that I was totally wrong about, okay? Because I wasn't sure if the house was destroyed. So, okay, I'm not going to say totally wrong, but I couldn't remember if the house was totally destroyed or not after the Braithwaite there tried to open the gates to Eden, and yes, it was totally destroyed after Hannah tried to get our boy Atticus out of the house, and she managed to do it. And also, another thing that I noticed is in the episode Holy Ghost, a lot of callbacks that we may have missed. Like, for example, when the one guy comes in and his dog is named Baldwin, and then he stops in front of Ruby's room and asks her if she's a writer too, or because his name is James. So I got James Baldwin, and then there was a lady walking by walking in the party that they were having in the house. Her name was Ella. So I like all these cool little callbacks to famous people, important people in Black history. So that's cool. And also the character of G okay. Now, I was kind of on the fence about this because people were asking who was that lady that Atticus was fighting in the room when they were all having their kind of, what would you call it? Their imaginings of things, right? And I think it was episode 2, and he was fighting this lady called this lady, and I didn't pick up on it until the captions came on, and her name is Chia, and I guess she definitely is the lady that he heard on the phone in episode 1, who said, "Oh, you went back. You shouldn't have." And she is being played by Jamie Chung, and she's a nursing student who finds herself springing into active service when war breaks out. But while she seems rather guileless, I don't know how to say that. A string of mysterious soldiers' disappearance suggests there's more to her than meets the eye. Guileless. That's a difficult one to say. So I guess she's the lady from the phone, and we'll get to know more about her as the series goes on. So definitely, her and Atticus had something going on in South Korea that he'd rather forget. I don't know if he murdered her, because obviously he just, she called him on the phone and they seemed to have a sort of okay relationship, but he definitely called her by her name in the scene. And so that's who that is. As far as this episode, okay, so what's going on so far? It's kind of nutty, right? They escape the house. We all know that George is dead, and Atticus's father Montrose really does not want his son to get involved in any of this stuff. He stole the book of the Order of Dawn and subsequently burnt it. So he definitely doesn't want his son involved in any of this stuff. But Atticus just keeps digging, mostly because Christina shows up at Lita's house and makes them all keep digging. And this is where this episode became a bit of an Indiana Jones style episode, which I really liked, by the way, because I love these kind of pulpy adventures, archaeological digs and going in tunnels. There's another movie I like. It's what's it called? American Treasure, right? These type of movies, I dig it, and of course, I dig Indiana Jones. But Indiana Jones is a total throwback to those type of adventure stories from the 1940s and 50s, etc. So that's what they're kind of playing with, the genre they're playing with this week, which I think is cool. It's becoming a mini anthology series, but like within a season, which is really interesting that they're being able to more or less pull it off. And we'll talk about whether or not they're completely being able to pull it off or not a little bit later. But I dig that style. Every episode last week was a definite horror show, ghost story. The first two episodes were just like, I don't know, lost kind of type mystery, a little bit of Twin Peaks or something. But here now we have a absolute adventure story, and it's going to involve our three main characters, which is Lita, Montrose, and Atticus. Montrose taking the place of George, who is dead, and who I believe will be back. I believe he'll be back from the dead. Because again, you got to see all the little clues that they're leaving. Remember that Montrose's favorite book is The Count of Monte Cristo, and that's explains why he figured out how to escape the prison he was in by digging his way out. And Uncle George's favorite book was Dracula, right? And coming back from the dead is definitely not out of the order for anything involving vampires. So let me know in the comments if you think Uncle George will be back. I do know that in the book he is alive, so I don't know why they changed that in the show, for what reason, but let's see if he does come back. So what happens is that they find out that they need to travel to Boston because there's pages here that they're looking for in a, basically it's a spell book. Okay, like this book that Titus Braithwaite way back in the day put together when he created this order, and it's like the secret society, and these books are full of spells, and some of the most powerful ones were the ones that Titus had, and he had it hidden away in a vault, a booby trapped vault. And certain lodge members have been trying to get to these missing pages so that they can decipher them and use all the power that's within them to become mega wizards. And so they realize, after a little bit of infighting between them, that they got to go to Boston to the museum there, which has stuff from Titus's collection. That this is where they're gonna find these missing pages, and it ends up that they they're able to sneak in at night with the help of one of the security guards, which may or may not have something going on with Montrose. And they go underground. They open a secret passage. It's great. It's Indiana Jones type, fun, really nice, really cool. They my favorite scene was where they had to cross this plank again, totally straight out of Indiana Jones, but it reminded me a little bit of Lord of the Rings, the first movie, where they have to cross a similar thing, right? They have to cross this kind of real skinny bridge with the what were those goblins in the Goblin Cave. So it brought back all these kind of cool feelings, which was nice and really well filmed. And they make it to the other side, and then the plank starts disappearing. Cool, cool stuff. Very cool stuff. And when they get there, they have more things to get through, more tunnels until they get to this part where they find this guy's arm stuck in this keyhole type thing, and Atticus decides to put his hand in there to see if he can open it up. Reminded me of Indiana Jones again, the second movie. Remember where the lady had to reach in to pull this lever to save Indiana Jones and the little kid from getting smashed, right? Getting crushed in there. So, similar feel. It opens up this hatch on the roof, which brings them up to Yahima. And I changed I changed a little bit of my screen here right before I started the title screen, and it got everything kind of out of order. So there you go. That's better. And this is where we'll talk a little bit about the controversy with Yahima. And I'm going to read straight out of the Vulture article, where they gave it a really bad review. They gave this episode like a 1-star review. And the guy or gal, let me see who wrote this. It's always nice to give credit, right? And it's by Stefan Triplet. Okay, or is it Stefan? But anyway, they, I'm not sure if it's a man or a woman, so we'll just say they said that this was the most upsetting part of the episode. Okay, to be introduced to Yahima, an Arawak person who exists outside of the gender binary, colonial and constructed, who then only 10 minutes later is violently killed, feels wrong. The characters use she and her pronouns for Yahima, and the show doesn't seem to indicate this as misgendering, but we simply don't get that validated from Yahima themselves. So I'm using they them pronouns in this recap. Even Yahima's introduction feels too gazy. We watch the characters look at their genitals, the camera leaning on body parts more than it ever has. In Yahima's words, though, translated through tick, they are woman, man, two spirit, because we don't get subtitles, because even their own words must be filtered through another character. It's impossible to get Yahima on their own terms. It just didn't have to be like this. All right. So, did the show jump the shark? That's what I want to talk about before we move on. My feelings about what else happened, because this whole article is kind of really bad review about how the show just felt like it was rushed, and they discovered the clues, and then they were able to open up the hatches here, open up the secret passage there. And I'll say this, in my earlier videos, if anybody has been subscribing and watching these videos, you saw that I think it was in episode 2 I kind of complained a little bit about that, especially with Atticus figuring out that, oh, it's magic, or figuring out that the father was in the dungeon. And on second rewatch, it felt a little bit more natural, but maybe that's because I already knew, but it didn't feel like it just came out of nowhere as much. But the show does tend to do that a little bit. It's an hour show. That could be one reason for it. The second reason for it is that the show is walking this fine line between modern entertainment, which requires kind of that, like, give us every little detail of why. It's kind of, when you watch the movies nowadays and the CGI effect, we can't just see a guy get shot, but we got to see like the bullet go into him and cutting through all of his insides, or when a virus gets in somebody, we see it getting into the DNA and mixing everything up. Okay, whatever. It's interesting. It's a nice CGI effect. It's a nice narrative style because we're not the writers realize, hey, audiences are smarter nowadays. We can't just tell them it is because it is. That being said, the show is operating on a level uh, of Pulp Fiction, basically, right? It's taking those elements of Pulp Fiction, of or even I'm thinking of the 1960s Batman, which is just fun, right? It's not. We don't have to think too deeply about it. Enjoy it for what it is. Even I was having a conversation with some people about Star Trek, the original series. There's a lot of Trekkies that just don't like it because they're like, man, it doesn't. It's so outdated, or there's not enough. What do you call it? I forgot the word now that I need here. Nuance. It's not as nuanced as maybe Star Trek: The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine, but that was the style back then. And if you put your mind in that mindset, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's enjoyable and it's a little bit campy at times, but the overarching story is great. The characters are great. It's an adventure that you come out of feeling good. Like, yes, this feels really nice. So when I watch Lovecraft Country, it feels to me, and you can disagree, correct me if I'm completely wrong, that the writers are trying to create that feeling of, hey, according to adventure stories, like even Atticus has a line like this, according to the logic of adventures or something like that. I forget what he said exactly. We should we should follow Titus's map to know which of these tunnels we got to take, because they when he went down in this hole in the museum, this underground passage, there were three tunnels. Which one to take? It was a little bit like the movie Scream, where don't ever say you'll be right back, because then you know you're gonna die, right? What are the rules to the horror genre? So what are the rules to the adventure genre? So, or even last week when with the episode with the ghost, where Lita's figuring out her house is haunted, and he says, "Well, if Uncle George was here, he would quote us something from a horror story that would tell us these ghosts are not gonna leave until you join them on the other side." Right? They're not going to stop tormenting you. So the show's very aware that it's playing off of these tropes, off of these pulp fiction tropes. So when they figure stuff out kind of quickly, well, that's just how it happens. It's not supposed to be something deeply thought out, right? Because then you leave the emotion, you leave that moment of excitement, which is them trying to open up a hatch at the last minute while a plank is disappearing behind them, and they can all plummet to their death. And they do it at the very last second. And yes, is it extremely stereotypical? Of course, but it's done with a wink and a nod. So that's what I am enjoying about the show. But it's a tough line because you don't want to go too much to make it seem like, well, these guys just aren't good writers. Look at them. They're just like, how did he figure that out? No, you can definitely go to that arena. But on the other side, there is the what they really want to do with the show, which is just create a fun, exciting show. Like I said in a couple episodes ago, imagine if there were shows like this in the 1950s with black characters. I think that's a little bit of what the show is trying to do too, right? Imagine if we had a version of, oh, I don't know what was big in the 1950s, but any of these like Buck Rogers or whatever were the fun, exciting shows of the 1950s, adventure shows. And imagine if it was an all black cast, right? That was out on these adventures. Imagine if Indiana Jones, for example, let's make it a little bit more modern. Imagine if Indiana Jones just happened to be a black guy and they just happened to be an 80% black to white ratio in that movie, right? It wouldn't have changed much. In fact, it probably wouldn't have changed anything because we know that Indiana Jones, if you take him totally out of the first movie, it changes nothing. Because the Nazis still get the Ark and they still open it, they still all die. Right? So he did absolutely nothing in that movie to prevent that from happening, and he did absolutely nothing to kill them. So so that's what the show for me is trying to do too. It's trying to play a little bit into that fantasy of that what if, which I really like, which I think is really smart, and it's really something we've never seen before, and it's what keeps me glued to the show. It's not a morality tale at the end of every episode. It's not a morality tale. We get things like last week where, yeah, call, say their names, look at all these people, look what happened to them as far as these medical experiments, which translates to stuff that actually did happen in real America. And a lot of the stuff that's on this show has happened in real America and continues to happen, but it doesn't. How do I put this? It's not like it's making a big deal of it. It's just saying, yeah, this stuff happened. People burned crosses in front of black people's homes. Some white folks did not like black people moving into their neighborhood. This stuff happened. This show is set in the 1950s, so what do you expect us to do? Like, they're just going to move into this house in a white neighborhood and nothing's going to happen to them? But it doesn't tend to make like this, like after you finish every episode, you're like, oh my God, you know, like I got to rethink my life now or my ideals now. No, it doesn't really do that, and I don't think it's trying to do that, and I appreciate it for that. It's just an adventure show that happens to be set in the 1950s, and there's a lot of racist motherfuckers around. So a lot of racist shit happens, but at its core, it's an adventure with a whole lot of wizardry, apparently, right? Which I said in episode 2. I don't know if I was gonna dig the magical stuff in it, but hey, I'm in. You know, they sold me on it. It is what it is. So I say all of that to say what? Going back to Yahima, is that this is not a woke show. I don't think. That's my opinion. And I think a lot of the woke people, and again, understand what we mean by woke. And I watched a great video where this guy kind of broke down the two versions of woke, because I'm not a huge fan of the word. Because there is a woke that I appreciate. It's the idea of be awake, be aware. Actually, I used to have a Facebook name which was Be Aware, until it became Be Alive. So awareness is great. Being awake, realizing, look, this is what's really happening is really good. So I think back when I was younger in the 90s and the early 2000s, when that term was used, I always took it very positively of being woke, of realizing what's really going down, not just with racism, but just society in general, politics, the media. It's not all everything you see isn't necessarily what it is, right? Realize that. So that's okay. I really like that. But then there's this wokeness of today, which is this progressive type wokeness of, well, I don't want to get too much into politics here, but it's not something that I dig so much, okay? Where it demands that everything be representative of everyone. And some things aren't. Some things don't have to be, and some things don't necessarily need to be. Someone's story doesn't have to be everybody's story. Like this is these folks' stories. Doesn't have to be a gay people's story, transgender people's story, white people's story, Latino people's story. No, this is the story of these black folks in the 1950s. They introduced a trans character, and she was killed. Was it a gratuitous killing? I don't think so because we don't know exactly why they spent so much time introducing her to then kill her off without getting a whole lot of more information out of her. So I would even hold judgment of the fact that they just killed her indiscriminately because we may see more of her. We don't know. She seemed like kind of a key element to the story moving forward. I could be wrong. Kind of like with Uncle George. It seemed like a pretty key element to some things moving forward. I think he might be back. And the show is slowly building its surrounding cast, so who knows? But this idea of her showing up, I did notice. Oh, is that a penis? Okay, but then she said, "Hey, I'm a two spirit." And why was it translated? Well, because or why were there no subtitles? So this is just kind of directing criticism to this paragraph here. There were no subtitles because she spoke Arawak, and it was kind of a mystery of how is it that Atticus was able to understand her. I hope they go back to that and kind of explain it, but we're starting to see that Atticus does have some powers that he maybe um, isn't aware that he has. Similar to last week, we realized that our friend Letitia maybe has some powers as a witch too, because she was able to control those ghosts and kind of cleanse her own house. Okay, so what is that? So, in order to be able to have that scene work, then she had to speak in her native tongue. I'm glad she didn't speak in English, right? She spoke in her native tongue, and the in Atticus translated it to everybody else. So I don't see what the problem is with that. It worked in the narrative. Two, I like that Montrose said, "What are you?" and Atticus corrected him immediately and said, "Who are you?" Not, it's a drama. Not everybody needs can be accepting or understanding of that. So imagine in the 1950s seeing a naked trans person. I don't know if if people would be comfortable with that necessarily, even in a clothed trans person. Okay, so it makes sense given that the narrative is set in the 1950s. So uh, they wouldn't be that accepted. Okay, just like we did see some gay characters. Atticus was like, okay, whatever, but but I remember in this episode, his buddy Tree was like, "Oh, is it because when I made you go out back, you saw the two guys getting it down, getting it on?" And he said, "I'm not a sissy." Okay, here's the word sissy. Now we're gonna get upset with this? No, I mean it's 1950s. Atticus, for all we know, doesn't seem to be a homophobe at the very least, but he's definitely straight. And he's definitely macho straight, toxic masculinity straight, right? Um, that was a joke, by the way. Maybe a bad one, but one nonetheless. So the way that they reacted to her, I thought was correct within the narrative structure of the show and within the characterization of the characters in the show. And why she was killed, we don't know. Now, I know that there's a documentary out there called Disclosure, and I want to watch it. I haven't gotten around to it, but it does talk about how trans characters in films are met with horror and disgust or humor at the expense of their dignity. And I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit from the Vulture article, and that this taught people in the real world how to react in the same ways. So while Yahima's two-spirit identity complicates Disclosure's framework, what happens to Yahima fits this trope. They're introduced and killed shortly thereafter. It fits into a history of violence. So, hey, maybe that's the point that they were trying to make. So the writer themselves there kind of got to my next point is she was killed. We got the trans character because we know the big trope in for blacks in a lot of these type of shows and movies, sci-fi, fantasy, horror, is that they would oftentimes not survive to the end. Maybe they'd be the first to die, or they would die towards the middle only after facing off, facing off the monster. Because if we see that the monster can kill the biggest, baddest of them all, which is the black guy, then we know we're really fucked. So maybe that could also be something to consider, is that they're trying to make the point that, look, here we introduce a trans character and we immediately kill them. Could be. Not sure. Okay. But I just know I wasn't that offended by it because it fit the narrative. It shows us that Montrose knows a whole lot more than he's letting on. This guy's a bit of an asshole, although he may just be protecting his son, in which case I may have to take that back. But the fact that they made it a point to have this black man kill this character and do so at very close range, so we it wasn't gratuitous, like, you know for me it would have been more gratuitous if, okay, when the water started crashing down. I don't know, maybe she held off the water through some magical powers for 10 seconds, so everybody got out and then she died, or she wasn't able to get out in time, or when the scroll escaped somebody's hand and went out of the elevator when they were trying to get up into the elevator, then she swam out. He, she, however you want to call them swam out and got they should be the sacrificial trans, like we have the sacrificial Negro who just shows up to save some white folks. Then okay, I could see that as being a bit more gratuitous. You just showed up to get killed. But since that didn't happen, I'm just willing to roll with it and see what they have in store. There was a similar criticism in the first season of Star Trek Discovery when Wilson Cruz, I think that's his name, he plays Dr. Colbert. He got killed around, spoilers, around mid-season. And they were like, "Oh man, this is such a trope, Gay guy shows up only to get killed." But guess what? He came back in season 2, and he seems to have come back a more interesting character. He's still not one of my favorite characters on the show, but hopefully in season 3 they'll build up a little bit more of the Doctor and see what he's about. But it was bizarre. I don't know if they needed to kill him off. It maybe could be that originally they just were really gonna kill him off, and then they got the backlash and they found a way to bring him back in season 2, because it was really convoluted how they brought him back. But whatever, they brought him back in season 2, but I don't think so, because he was kind of signed on and he was like real Trek ready. So who knows? So that's my opinion about that. Did the show jump the shark by doing this, by not being woke enough, by having too many quick edits and not really digging into some of the issues of racism at a deeper level? No, that's the short answer. See, I could have saved you 10 minutes of your time. But that's my short answer. No, it didn't. It hasn't. The show is still cool. By the way, let me just check if there's anybody on. No, there isn't. Okay. Not right now. Um, because every once in a while, please check the video's resolution. The current resolution. Oh, whatever. All right. Anyway, so that's all I got to say about Yahima. Okay. In the show up as a whole. And by the way, so when they do find it, I mentioned the elevator, but so underground there's some type of temporal. Well, it wouldn't be temporal, would it? It would be more like of a wormhole, like a space, um, kind of interdimensional space portal. So that they were in Boston, and then all of a sudden they were under Lita's apartment, or house, sorry. So this that explains that, because I had seen in a group that somebody was asking, how did they make it from Boston to Chicago? And I was like, well, that's how they did it, because this show is full of magic and interdimensional stuff, including these interdimensional monsters, which is from the Lovecraft side of it. What is it, the Winthrop house, I believe? And Winthrop was trying to get his hands on this book too, so that's probably why he built his elevator to go down into this interdimensional portal and tried to find out where he could find these books. As far as the other characters, we're kind of fleshing them out a little bit more. We're getting a little bit more of Ruby, who was trying to apply for this job at Marshall's, but when she gets there, this other girl got the job, which I thought was an interesting thing for them to do, because sometimes black folks will get stuck on the narrative of, oh, it's racism, the reason I didn't get this is because it's racism, the reason I didn't get that job or didn't get that opportunity is racism. And sometimes it's just because maybe you weren't good enough, or maybe it's just luck of the draw, maybe uh, they liked somebody better than you just personality wise. There could be like a multitude of reasons before racism of why something happened. And I don't know if that's what this scene was trying to get across. That's what I got from it. And I don't know if they showed exactly what Ruby got out of it, except that she was really depressed about it because this other girl got the gig, and she knew, okay, they're definitely not going to hire two black girls to work at Marshall's. But I thought that was interesting enough that they put that in there, and it ends up that her and what's his name, Christina's sometimes boyfriend, sometimes friend. He's a boy and a friend whose name I forgot. I had written it down, but I'll get to it because, oh, I got it right here, guys. His name is, who has it before me? Who has it before me? It's William, right? William. So William shows up at the bar where Ruby is playing, and he starts hitting on her. And before you know it, they're screwing, even though she's like, it's never going to happen. Well, it happened, girl. And she got down and dirty. And why? Some folks were asking, why did she get down and dirty? Well, listen to the music, listen to the clues. This show is all about the clues are around you, as far as the literature, the music, everything kind of fits in, especially the Marilyn Manson song so far, which I've really been enjoying. In this episode, by the way, I remember I made the criticism that I didn't like that they put modern music in the show because it takes you out of the 50s a little bit. But hey, it's supposed to be a bridge to some of the stuff happening today to Black America. So okay, we can deal with that from that thematic level. But I like this episode. They were just like, fuck it. I don't remember anything or any songs that were period songs. And I definitely dig Marilyn Manson. So he sang the song, though. The song that was playing is I Put a Spell on You. Okay. So I thought it was pretty clear, at least to me, that he put a spell on her that made her want to be with him. And then they had some good sex, and he drank some of her blood, and what the hell is going on, right? Because they're going for everybody, not just Atticus, which makes me wonder if everybody has a little bit of a shine to them, okay? If everybody has some power or a shine to them that is important to the Braithwaites to get what they need to get done. Uh-oh. And that brings me, oh, there they are, to uh, I just said his name, and Christina. Let me see. William. Okay, William and um, and Christina, right? And one theory that I saw thrown out there, and it made me think, is that we haven't seen the two of them in the same room together. Could they be the same person? Could she just be kind of transforming into him magically when she needs to? I don't know. What do you guys think? Post it in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. But definitely post it in the comments and let me know what you think about that. We do find out a little bit more about Christina's motivations in this episode. The fact that maybe she knew that Atticus would be way too strong for her father. And so she's been studying these folks, right? And so she used Atticus as a way, like it was a Trojan horse, in order to kill her own dad because she's really not happy with the fact that these lodges, these uh, societies, secret societies, don't accept the women, and she wants to get some power for herself. So she's after these books herself, and she realizes that if she gets her hands on it, she's gonna have so much power that she'll be unstoppable, right? So she's got her own motivations. We find out a little bit more about that, which is nice. And we also find out that she oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Whatever. But anyway, we get to see a little bit more of her motivation in this episode of what she's after. And she does want Atticus to join her in this search. But they're trying to find this book in order to protect themselves from this crazy bitch. Right? So I hope we get to see more of her. Obviously, we're going to get to see more of her and what she is all about. But I want to know, are these the same people? And something else, and there you go. Let me move this a little bit down here. Okay, is that we got Hippolyta and Diana. Okay, speaking of people with a shine, we already see that Diana's got a little bit of prognostication skills, right? Because she was drawing all over Uncle George's atlas, including the little death symbol when they were going into Lovecraft Country. So, what is the shine that is around these folks, and where does it come from? How are they all connected? And it reminds me of Hippolyta and Diana, which, aka Wonder Woman, okay, where it's the mom who is strong and powerful, but not as powerful as the daughter that she sends out into the world. So I wonder if that in any way is going to be a parallel story because I still want more of them. I love them to death. As I was watching the episodes yesterday with my friend, I kept telling her I want some more of these two because I think they're so cool. The mom is wonderful. The little girl is super adorable, super smart, and it looks like we may be getting it because they went to Boston to the museum with everybody because they had to use their car, so they made up the story about it being just a trip to the museum. But Atticus, Lita, Montrose, and Yahima made it back to Chicago via elevator teleport, right? And these two were driving home by themselves. And they're like, the little daughter's like, how did they get back without Woody, the car? And the mom's like, I don't know. And then she saw that Dee had the atlas and she looked at it and she's like, you know what? We need to get some answers of what is going on because she senses that there's something off about everything, about the what really happened to Uncle George, etc., etc. So we shall see, folks. I want to see more of them, and I want to see how their story develops, and I want to see what powers Dee has. So far, everybody's shown that they have a little bit, well, not everybody, but we have some characters that are showing that they have some shine. So, how much shine are we going to get in this story? So, that's pretty much it for my Lovecraft Country review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, like and subscribe to the page. On Monday nights, I'm here, which will be in just a few hours, talking movies in general with my friend Peter. We're also doing a ranking of the Alien franchise, so look out for that. And look out for the other rankings on the page. And that's it, folks. That's it. Thank you for watching. Tell me your thoughts on this episode of Lovecraft Country. Are you still as in love with the show now as you were in episode 1? Or do you think it's kind of moving too fast, not explaining things as well as it should, not really giving depth to its main characters, not giving them agency? I saw that as a criticism that they're just kind of used as vessels to move the plot along, but we really don't get to see much of their motivations and what they're about. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. I tend to disagree. I think that they're pretty well fleshed out, and the show's not supposed to be this serious drama where although it does have some dramatic moments, and it does have moments where we get to see a little bit of these characters' motivations and what they're about and what makes them tick and what ticks them off also. So let me know what you think about that. Until next time,